Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Yellowstone Season 3, Episodes 5 and 6. So, it seems that we really have market equities and, of course, Yellowstone kind of having this back and forth kind of matchup here in these episodes. Plus, we have kind of like themes going on with two themes going on with this episode also. We have Casey, who seems to be dealing with these episodes via case-by-case basis, meaning in 2 episodes it seems that he is to be kind of stretching out certain things for this episode to eventually have this case being put together. And then the other theme is to kind of finally get to why Jamie and Beth are to be at such odds with one another, and how they end up saying the worst, hateful thing that they can possibly imagine to say to one another, and we figure out why. We have it where recently now that comes to the forefront, and it gets to when everybody is to get to finally know what exactly this problem is. So, yeah, that seems to be the most simplistic way to go on and just talk about this episode. Really, I'm really loving really Rainwater in these episodes. Just just really liking the guy. Just really enjoying him. He's because we barely get much of the guy in most of the episodes, or if he's there, it's just not really, they really figured out, I think, a good place to kind of fit Rainwater in these episodes, and that's a thing that I can really just be like, okay, so they couldn't have figured it out before, but now they kind of have figured it out. And so it seems that Rainwater is going to possibly be on the side of the Duttons. It seems like we have a weird kind of partnership kind of going on in there. But again, if John was to have any say on it, both him and Rainwater are still technically enemies, but it seems like that enemy thing is kind of softening up a little bit. And so we'll kind of see how that goes. We also have John that is to, for the most of these episodes, kind of Beth is to say, he is to just kind of find his, his zen. He is to find his, comfort. He is to, because I think he really has just gotten exactly what he has really wanted. And so he should be happy, but then once we get to the last of this episode, we end up finding out that John is to go from being this zen dad to all of a sudden just be this guy of just God, what am I even doing here? Why am I even how about we just go on and just sell this whole ranch? What's the point of it now? It just it feels like John might come to a space or place or whatever to if there's a good enough deal on the table, you might as well just go ahead and take it, because what else is really left here? What else is really for John here to eventually give away, to throw away, is really what we find within these episodes. So, with that said, let's just go into spoilers. I think that's all that I want to go out of my way to say in these episodes. It seems that there's some kind of counterbalancing action going on between the market equity people and the Duttons. So we'll have that be more crystal clear within this let's go into it. Let's go into that 5, because otherwise that time again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time in spoiling. Spoiling? Is that English? No, it's not. Let's go into that time again to spoil these episodes. Phew. So, I don't know. What am I even doing? I don't know. We'll figure it out. So, episode 5, of course, is to be an episode where we have a guy named Boyd Nelson, who is to go off to see his farm going into foreclosure, or his barn. And so he eventually is to go off and decide to take his own life, seemingly in the middle of his cattle. So all of a sudden, Casey, who's to take this case because the sheriff is to give it to him, Casey is to, of course, find out that his farm is foreclosing. And so Casey is to want to try to do the right thing here and go and buy off all of this cattle with someone else's wallet. But Casey might get some kind of flack for this. He might get in trouble for this. So Casey's to go on and ask John, which is technically his mentor, about, like, well, is this the right move here? And John's like, well, hey, like, whatever you decide is whatever you decide. Like, if anything, it's the right thing to do. But so, well, and Casey is just like, well, like, if I go ahead and do this, I might need your help. And John's like, well, hey, like, if you agree to this, like, from me, you can get whatever you want. So, like, I'm giving you the green light if you really want to go and do the right thing for this family. And so Casey goes off and starts selling away this cattle, giving the money eventually to Mrs. Nelson, Carol Nelson. And John was to also ask about this family to kind of see if... So Casey's asking John about this family to kind of see, like, if there's any kind of hard feelings with anybody that he can go on and try to, like, sell all this stuff off without, like, him getting flack for it. And John was to go on and say that this guy was a cowboy and a dreamer, and, like, really eventually the longer and longer he went on to, like, do what he was doing, the more angry that he was to eventually get. And so Casey is to go on and sell all of this cattle and then to go and give this woman the money and say, it's like, well, hey, like, this could be money towards a funeral. And Carol's to say, it's like, well, no, like, I'm not going to bury that man. He can just go and sit, like, lay out in that field all he wants, because I'm not doing a funeral for him. And so she mentions that this guy was a cowboy and a dreamer, and eventually she's going to go and forcibly marry, like, the exact same kind of man, because that's just an inevitable thing that's going to happen. So now that that's all covered, now that that's all out of the way of the seemingly story, now we can go into little bits and pieces about stuff in this episode. So what else is going on in this episode? So we seem to have Rourke, who, of course, is to find out that Beth is going out of her way to bleed Rourke dry as far as stocks goes. And so Rourke, who is to be a man that is to desperately want to go fishing, is to have to stay at home all day long, going and selling certain stocks, trading certain things. and so on and so forth, to the point of Rourke, like, I'm gonna have to say this way, even though I don't like saying it, he gets in a hissy fit, and he just starts flinging and swinging and whatever. He's like, God, I just want to go fishing. Because every time he ends up getting a call saying that his stock is to be sold somewhere else, to where then Rourke was to, of course, like, had to go back into his place, having to adjust things, to just turn around and realize that he has to keep going back and fixing things, and he gets severely annoyed. So Rourke goes on to meet with Beth, and so Beth and Rourke are talking about fishing, and how Beth realizes that Rourke is a catch and release fisher, and that reasonably she's like, well, why would you even want to go and fish then? Doesn't that feel like a waste? Rourke, I guess, doesn't like to eat fish. He just likes to catch it. He just likes the, I guess, the, like the struggle of it, the fun of it, or whatever. And there isn't any real end goal but his just enjoyment, his just relaxation. And so we then, having them like kind of breaking down all these things in like metaphors about like the like Rourke wanting to put anything into a fish's mouth and hook and whatever. And Rourke is like, well, yeah, like the fish don't even feel pain, and so on and so forth, because it's different from everything else. So we break that all down, but really at the end of all this, Rourke is just to turn to Beth and say, hey, if you're going to do whatever you want with my stocks, but just leave me to go on and fish. Like, just go on and do like the trading on like some off on some off time, where I can go through and I can get my own fish. And Beth is like, okay, sure, whatever you want, but like, I'm still just gonna ruin your company. So, but Rourke gets what he wants, and Beth gets what he wants, but then the market equity people are going to also turn around and hire a guy named Wade Morrow, and I think Ethan. And so Wade and Ethan are going and taking Buffalo and kind of putting them along this this Yellowstone ranch fence, because the buffalo are, I guess, made to break these fences. And so Rip is to see both Wade and this other guy, Ethan, and they're like, hey, what are you guys doing here? And so they're like, well, hey, like, we were just told by these like these sports club people to just bring these buffalo here, even though really they say it's like, oh, well, like the sports club people aren't doing nothing. Like, there's still like somebody has their hooks into these people. And so Rip, of course, gets irritated with one of the people mouthing off. And so Rip is to say, it's like, hey, you better watch your tone of how you talk to me. And then, like, we almost kind of have a breakout fight here. I'm like, good God, like, Rip just cannot just not fight people. But anyways, we also have Jamie, who is to be going on and be, like, deputized as the, like, deputized? That may not sound correct. But Jamie is, of course, getting sanctioned in, whatever the term is, to, of course, be the Attorney General here. And so we end up having Jamie turn around and calling Randy and mentioning that he is the Attorney General. and that he's the most powerful he's the most powerful man in this town. And so Randy is just like, well, who exactly is going to be the livestock commissioner? And that, of course, is Casey, just so you know, Randy. And so Jamie is to tell Randy, it's like, well, yeah, like I willed this all to happen. And because, of course, that whole problem from once before, Jamie is now calling Randy to just tell him, like, yeah, like I'm in a higher position than you, so I'm not going to put up with your crap anymore. And, like, if you need any help whatsoever from me, and I'm also, like, calling if we, like, have any, like, problems to, like, resolve here also. Like, we have Jamie that's just kind of like, yeah, like, suck it, Randy. And we'll see where that goes. But, like we have Jamie like having a feel good moment where he's just like, yeah, suck it, Randy. Where it's just like, wow, okay. So we go on and excuse me. We also have Jimmy that is to make it back from the hospital. And Jamie is to, of course, bring along his girlfriend and a girl named Laramie, I believe, if I'm ill pronouncing that. It's a new character. So these two girls are going and trying to see where Jimmy is going to hang his hat, technically. And he's like, well, I sleep on this top bunk. And they're like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work for you, considering you're injured. And so Jimmy, of course, is going into this bunkhouse, and these girls are drinking all their beer, and Jimmy is to tell them that, like, hey, don't drink this beer, like, they're going to hate this. And so all the field hands coming in, they don't have a problem with it because there's hot women dancing around. Teeter eventually goes and is to start dancing around also. And then, and I know, like, there's a whole thing that I'm missing here. I'm going to get to that. There's a couple things. There's two things definitely that I'm missing here, but we'll get to that. Because when Jamie was to be sanctioned in, he was to go and talk to Governor Perry and mention that, hey, like, the main reason why he was, like, got in this position was not because of his father, and he knows that, and he really appreciates that. And he's telling Governor Perry this, that it's like, yeah, I really appreciate that you're giving me this opportunity. So eventually the guys come in and they're looking at these women, and it seems that Kobe is starting to warm up to Teeter because she's starting to dance around. Like, hey, like, she's a dancer. I don't know. So we just consistently have these characters going on and, like, listening to music and all kinds of things. And Rip is to start to get annoyed with these characters just kind of like playing some really loud music up until X amount of time, because he is to want to get them to bed at a certain time and whatever and what have you. So Rip ends up going in there to find also that Beth is also in this bunkhouse, and Rip is like, I knew it was you all along. So let's get into the meat and the potatoes about the very beginning of this episode, because I'm kind of dancing around it because, like, this is also a very sensitive subject. So Beth, of course, in her younger years, flashback Beth, younger Beth, is to go on in the very beginning of this episode and is to take a pregnancy test and to find out that she is pregnant. So Beth, of course, is to go to Jamie and say, hey, like, you need to help me. And Jamie's like, I'm not going to go and help you go shopping somewhere. No, that's not, like, because Jamie is to, I guess, be leaving to go to Harvard soon? Question mark. So he's going off to college soon. So Beth is to say, it's like, well, Jamie, like, I really need your help. And so Jamie's like, okay. So Jamie is to decide to go and take Beth to a clinic to terminate this pregnancy. But the weird thing about this fertility clinic is that this woman is to say, it's like, well, hey, like, you can take her in here, but we're going to turn around and sterilize her. Like, that's the thing that we do here. If that is it. So, because we find out that Beth, of course, is pregnant with Rip's child. And so Jamie, of course, has asked Beth who it is, and Beth is not to say. And so, because she doesn't think that's any of Jamie's concern, and Jamie's like, well, heck yeah, it is. It's my concern. So eventually Jamie is to not tell Beth about the sterilizing like thing. And so Beth is to find out later that she's basically sterile, that she can't be pregnant anymore. So, but we have Beth that, of course, like, that's the main reason why her and Jamie are to basically be at odds with one another. And so we kind of have to, like, come back around in the 6th episode and re-talk about that. So, and I hope I've kind of covered that, that debacle, the real reason behind that. I'm like, wow, that's, man, like taking a choice out of somebody's hand, but what can you do? Like, what's done is done, sadly enough. So, but again, there's still options out there. There's always adoption and so on and so forth. And like, there's surrogates and whichever, technically. But, hey, whatever. So, but it's still just not, like, technically your child, but, you know, still. So, it seems we are, of course, having Lloyd, who seems somewhat to have a bit of a girlfriend here, with Laramie. And so, because it seems that Laramie is asking, like, Lloyd, it's like, well, hey, do you dance? And Lloyd is like, hey, there's nothing that I can't do. And so, like, in the next episode, we have Lloyd, who's turning around and realizing that it's like, God, I'm a buckle bunny. Like, I'm freaking, like, chasing after a woman that's not even 25 years old. But it's like, hey, man, like, freaking, like, Lloyd getting freaking, like, ladies man Lloyd. Yeah. Come on, Lloyd. Like, woman's chasing after you. Hey, man, good for you. Like, good for you, Lloyd. So, so yeah, it's kind of funny also when they're to try to figure out that Teeter, I guess, like, certain people can understand her. And, like, Colby's having his own, like, conspiracy theory of how exactly Teeter can be understood by certain people. And so I think we end up having Ryan, who talks to Colby, and is like, hey, like, she's really just, like, growing on you. And he's like, I don't know about that. So, but yeah, but we also had, like, the Attorney General Stewart, who was to go and like, give Jamie the book of the Bible, and John is to watch every second of that. and is to have Jamie repeat what he used to go on and say. So Rainwater is going and talking to John, and Rainwater's still John. It's like, well, hey, you're a hard man to find nowadays. And John's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the purpose, where he kind of purposely goes into a number of places where he either can't use his phone or like his phone can't use him, basically. So Rainwater is now to now ask John. It's like, well, hey, like we need to put our heads together and have certain people go off after these market equity people and figure out how to just start knocking them down, because like they're our new enemy and we have to kind of like we have to deal with them. And so John is like, okay, yeah, like I definitely have a person in mind. If you have definitely a person in mind, which Rainwater already does. So it seems it's going to be really interesting who that person is eventually going to be. I'm assuming it's probably going to be Beth. Like, but maybe it might be surprisingly Jamie. I don't know. Like, I would naturally assume it's Beth, though. But we'll figure that out in other episodes. So, we also have Monica when all of the field hands and John Dutton and everybody are going and chasing after these horses, getting them from off some mountain and trying to make them back into the barn where they can fence them in, or at the ranch where they can fence them in. That makes more sense. And so Monica all of a sudden is having Tate starting to cuss and use cuss words. And so Monica's like, well, where did you learn that from? And then all of a sudden we have any number of field hands that are all like cussing like pirates or sailors or whatever. And so Monica is to finally go to Lloyd and say like, hey, like, could you guys just kind of like censor yourself just a little bit, like around Tate? It's like, come on, man. So Lloyd is just like, okay, like we'll figure something out. So we also have Monica telling the guys to keep their tent out in where they were kind of tenting, because it's like, heck yeah, like Tate is to love it, so you might as well just kind of keep that tent out there anyways. And so they're like, okay, sure do. So, or sure will. So I'm just trying to see if all of my bases are covered with this episode. Which I think, yeah, I think I'm roughly, I think I'm pretty well good and done with this one. Let's go into the next episode. So, going into episode 6, we still have some things kind of left from episode 5, but let's get to casting order. In the very beginning of this episode, we have a girl named Seela that is to go missing. And so we have Ben Waters and we have Rainwater, who are to now go and know about this case. And so Rainwater is to try to find a number of people to help on this case. And Rainwater actually calls Casey. It's like, well, hey, like, can you help me? Like, go and find some volunteers and some, like, officers to go and help this case. And Casey's like, well, hey, yeah, like, right away. Like, I'll figure out, like, who I can send. And so they go on this hunt for a girl named Seela because her sister had went out and tried to look for her before and couldn't find her anywhere. Plus, like, she was basically looking at night, where you aren't going to have a really good bet at finding her anyways. So these people go out and start searching for them. Monica is to get a crap ton of volunteers. And so they go on and start searching for this girl to eventually find the bodied remains of this girl. And so Monica is to like kind of soak in this tub that is to seemingly be like a swimming pool. And she's talking to Casey, and she's like, well, like there's so much evil in the world, like what can we do to really just try and like prevent like all of this? Because when really looking at it, like talking about evil, we end up having Beth talking to Jamie and mentioning how like Jamie is really to be evil because Jamie is to do whatever he is to have to do to try to get uh like basically John's love, like John's acceptance and John's whatever. And that Beth is saying that Jamie is really truly evil because of that whole thing, that whole ordeal. And then Jamie and Beth kind of come to this real like hey, let's finally bring this up. Like let's finally take this skeleton out of the closet and like finally talk about it. But let's finish up. So let's finish up the other story. So Monica is to go on and search more through the area that Sela was eventually found, and Rainwater is to go and find her. Just be like, well, hey, like any more that you're gonna do here is just gonna end up having you go missing, and maybe you should just call it a day. And Monica's like, well, like I just don't feel like I can. It feels like I'm gonna find something here. And Rainwater is like, well, hey, like how about instead of doing this, you go and fight for our people and eventually kind of lead the way to having people like not forget that we exist kind of thing. And like we'll see where that heads. Because Rainwater was to mention that supposedly Rainwater was to phrase it that Native Americans were just supposed to blend in with white people and be forgotten and have all their land get sold, and they could not have been bothered to try and do that. And so now we have Rainwater who is to go on to this like, hey, let's not forget our past, and like let's remind everyone else like that we matter, and like they do. So so yeah, let's go back to that Jamie and Beth situation. So Jamie and Beth, of course, are going on and talking about that old skeleton in the closet. And so Jamie is to go on and say that everything that he has ever done is to protect this family. And Beth, of course, comes back with like, well, like you aren't going to ever really be truly trusted. Like if anything, our father like hates you, and like there's nothing that you're going to do to like be in like the opposite of that. So Jamie then is to also say like how he has had to go on and protect this family even from themselves, and the perfect example of that would probably be Beth. How there has been numerous times where Jamie has probably protected Beth from herself. And so like all this to kind of lead with Beth eventually leaving Jamie and going off to John and finally breaking the news to John about Beth being sterile because of Jamie, because of that whole ordeal. because Beth is to go out to John and say, it's like, well, hey, like, you're so peaceful, weirdly. And John is just like, well, yeah, like, because he's kind of technically gotten every single thing that he's ever wanted. And, like, why would he be upset now? So, and I know there's probably a lot more stuff going on in this episode. I'm just kind of getting to the meat and the potatoes of it all. So, because there's a whole thing with Lloyd and Jimmy that I kind of, like, I talked about, but I didn't fully go into. Plus, like, we just have these characters, these field hands, having just consistently more fun in this episode, and we'll talk about that also. So, John eventually is to find out that technically Jamie had made Beth sterile in one way or another. So John goes on, is now having like this like upset like approach to Jamie, chasing after him in the house. And John is to tell Jamie, it's like, stop running around my house. Like, just stop where you're, like, stop dead in your tracks. And so John is confronting Jamie about what had happened, mainly because John is frustrated how there's probably going to be not much of this family that are to have, like, grandkids and have this ranch eventually be left to somebody. Like, I'm like, well, what is Tate? Like, isn't Tate gonna have this ranch eventually? Like, what is, like, Jamie technically has a kid on the way. Why didn't Jamie bring that up finally? Wouldn't that have been a perfect time for Jamie to bring up his kid? But yeah, but all that's really to be thought about is that Beth can't have a child. And so John and Jamie are kind of chasing themselves around in this mansion. And then John is to go off and realize that all that he's doing right now is all pointless because it's going to go nowhere. That eventually this ranch is going to get sold away to someone, because John is to tell Beth, like, well, hey, like, you need to go and trust your brother, and you need to go and teach Casey what to do. And Beth is just like, well, like, I don't trust Jamie. And John is just like, well, why? And then Beth finally tells the Jamie story, and then that's what gets John so upset. So, now let's get to the Jamie and Lloyd story. So, both Lloyd and Jimmy are going and watching Maya and Lorelai practice. Is that Lorelai? Am I saying that correct? Laramie? There we go. We have both these two practicing, and so Jimmy and Lloyd are kind of talking about rodeo. Besides talking about these women and how, like, I'm sure that Maya is eventually going to want more from Jimmy than having him just live at this bunkhouse. And Jimmy is talking about, well, hey, like, if I can just go and eventually do some roping, like in the rodeo, like, I think I'll be fine, because Jimmy can't go on and have John pay for his injuries again. And Lloyd is just like, well, like, John did the same thing for me. Like, I used to be a rodeo guy too, but then eventually my body told me that I can't do this anymore. And so, like, I stopped. And we have Jimmy kind of talking to Lloyd about Laramie, and how Lloyd has just kind of become this buckle bunny that's kind of chasing after this 25-year-old girl, or supposedly almost 25-year-old girl. And so, but it's like we have like two of these characters at like kind of like different times in their life, but both of them are very similar, and it's interesting to like see this story unfold between the two of both Lloyd and Jimmy here. How probably the main reason why Lloyd had latched himself onto Jimmy so much is because maybe Lloyd saw a lot of Jimmy in him, and so that's why he's kind of mentoring Jimmy and so on and so forth. But Lloyd is telling Jimmy, it's like, well, hey, like, you have a choice. Regardless of what John says, you have a choice to do the rodeo or not. So, like think of that before, like, you or decide, like, immediately that you can say no to doing a rodeo. And Jimmy used to say it's like it's all that he's ever wanted to do. And Lloyd was like, well, yeah, like I felt that too, but then my body told me that I can't do this anymore. So yeah. So we also have the point where John, Casey, and all the livestock agents are going to Wade. And so John, of course, is to ask Wade, it's like, well, hey, what's your new scam here? What's your new thing that you're putting on? And it's like, hey, man, it's just all about these buffaloes. And, like, the sports club is to have, like, these people go and look at them. So, like, hey, we're just watching over them. And so now we have these two characters just kind of talking it out, Casey and Wade. And so Casey's like, well, hey, you better keep all these buffalo on this side of the fence. And Wade's like, well, like, what are you going to do if they get on your side of the fence? And Casey's like, well, you're not going to like what's going to happen when that happens. So, like, so we have this kind of, like, war of worlds here, or war of words, where at first John is to say for everybody to kind of take it easy and don't get emotional, but then John turns around and he ends up saying all the stuff that he says, and it's like, well, yeah, I guess, like, don't get emotional, right? And John's like, whatever. So so it's kind of funny. We end up having, of course, them giving Wade giving them paperwork telling that all these buffalo don't have any kind of thing wrong with them. And so they're like, oh, okay, well, like, at least it's not going to get any of our cattle or anything like that sick, so that's fine. But still, like, get your buffalo on one side of the fence here. So we push on and have all the field hands deciding, since there's so much buffalo on this side of the fence, like, how about we go and we have ourselves a buffalo riding contest like thing. And because they're watching this show and they're watching some guy ride on this buffalo, and they're like, how is it that, like, this person can go and ride on this buffalo? It's like, well, because, like, the buffalo is, like, you can't get really bucked off of this thing, because it just can't. And so they go on and they can't rope the neck of the buffalo. They have to, like, rope the horns. And so they go on and they rope the horns of this buffalo. And so Laramie gets on it first and she rides it, and then she jumps off. And then she ends up saying that she's, like, had really fun, a lot of fun doing that. And so eventually people just start getting on it and start, like, riding it, but you only see really one person. You have to naturally assume they all had fun doing that. So what else is also to get covered in this episode? We have the one moment where Jamie was going on and talking to a lawyer, I believe, Willa Hayes. And, like, this is the market equities lawyer who's going on and putting a price tag to Jamie's farm, mentioning that it's like $500 million or something. And so it's like, well, hey, like if you had that kind of money, you can go and buy anything. There's no price tag that you uh, would have to say no to once you get rid of this thing of land. So we had uh, this one person after we have kind of the market equity people after they're to leave, just saying like, like I think we kind of hooked this guy, and like Jamie's really wanted, he has some desire about this, and it's like, well, yeah, but the only problem is like it's not like him that you're gonna have to go and please. It's you're gonna have to go after John. So why not just like why waste the time? Why not go off to just go and talk to John right away? Person that technically owns the land. So we also had that one ending of eventually Casey coming in and now hugging on to Jamie. And after Jamie is to go on and talk to John, Jamie is to go and break a glass part of this door, and is to mention that he hates John and hates him. And Casey doesn't even know what's going on, and he wants to like, excuse me, like I would like some information here, but yeah, not quite gonna happen. So, like, I want to try to perfectly see if there's anything left to cover here. And I honestly think that there may not be for these episodes. I think that I've luckily just cleverly just figured out a way to just call it a day for this one. So if there's anything else that I forgot about, because I'm sure it's bound to happen, I'm trying to think if there's any more Beth Rourke situations being brewing in this episode. I don't think there is. But yeah, so I think there might have been one thing from possibly the last episode where like it was a Beth and Rip thing where eventually Beth was waking up in the middle of the night to go and like I think light a cigarette outside of the place where Beth and Rip were sleeping, and Rip is to go out there and just kind of like ask Beth like, hey, what's the problem? She's to have a bad memory nightmare kind of thing, and Rip is like, well, that's possibly the worst one. And so Rip is of course trying to comfort Beth as she eventually is going to head back to sleep possibly. So with that said, I think I've covered everything, but I don't know. Like I go about these in a very roundabout way, and I paraphrase, and I do all kinds of things. So with that said, call this one what it is. So I'm going to get the heck out of here. I'm continuing to have fun with this series, even though like I do realize how like people are expecting these to be coming out on a certain day, and then I don't deliver that, and then people would be like, "Oh, well, what the like I watch blah 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 thing," and I'm not like, I'm kind of all over the place with these reviews, but like bear with me as I try to keep churning these out, because technically there are only certain number of seasons left or episodes left in the season, and then I will go on and eventually go into season 4 when that is a thing. Whether it is a thing already, because I just don't know. I'm not paying attention, like close attention to that until it's actually that time to get into that. Like I'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So, with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.